They said it was just a YouTube stunt, a clickbait challenge, another MrBeast spectacle designed to rack up millions of views. But what started as a $1,000 Viking-themed competition in the California wilderness turned into something darker, something no one, not even MrBeast, was ready for. It began with a drone shot teaser. Two men, two codes of honor. One will walk away. One will vanish. Most people thought it was scripted, until MrBeast dropped a trailer with real blood on his face and a line that would ignite the internet. I've done crazy things for content. But this is war. The rules were simple, or so we thought. MrBeast had to survive 7 days in a secret location modeled after a Viking stronghold. No modern tools, no crew interference, no shortcuts. And facing him, a mystery challenger only known as the Norseman. People speculated wildly. Was it an actor, a former Marine, a plant for dramatic effect? They were wrong. Because when MrBeast landed blindfolded in a remote forest outside Shasta County, California, the first thing he heard wasn't a welcome. It was the distant sound of a war horn. And when he pulled off the blindfold, standing 30 feet away, bare-chested, covered in war paint, holding a massive hand-forged axe, was a man with no name, no words, just one carved symbol on his chest, a Valknut, the Viking mark of death and sacrifice. Jimmy nervously turned to the camera, forcing a grin. Okay, I guess we're starting. Then the war horn blew again, louder, closer, and every viewer watching the live stream saw what MrBeast couldn't. In the trees behind him, another figure was moving. Jimmy MrBeast stood frozen. The war horn echoed through the forest canopy. Leaves rustled behind him. He turned slowly, but by the time he spun around, the second figure was gone. Just a shadow already vanished. The camera crew had been dismissed. This was a sealed zone. No phones, no outside help. Just solar drones recording silently from above. Still grinning for the audience. Half bravado, half fear, Jimmy muttered. Okay, it's just me, a Viking psychopath, and apparently someone else. Cool. Cool. Then a voice crackled through the hidden earpiece they'd let him keep for emergency contact. Stay on task. The Norseman has accepted the challenge. Follow the trail north. That was it. No explanation. No security detail. Just a GPS arrow burned into the edge of a weathered wooden compass shaped like a vegvisir, a Viking wayfinder. Jimmy huffed and started walking. His boots sank into mud. Branches scratched his face. And every few minutes, he heard it. Breathing. Not his, not an animal, just close, just out of view. He climbed a ridge, pushed past a dense thicket of pine, and emerged into a clearing. That's when he saw it. A massive wooden gate, carved runes, animal skulls, torches burning in the daylight. And above the gate, an old hand-carved wooden sign read, Jarnheim, Iron Home. Inside the compound, a full-scale Viking village. Smoke from longhouses, animal hides stretched on racks. A blacksmith's forge still warm. Jimmy stepped forward. Suddenly, wham! An axe buried into the dirt just inches from his left foot, thrown from somewhere above. Then came a voice, deep, rough, unmistakably real. This is not a game. Jimmy froze. The Norseman stepped from the shadows. His eyes locked on Jimmy like a predator testing prey. You come for views, I come for blood. Before Jimmy could respond, the Norseman dropped a sack at his feet. It hit the ground with a squelch. Jimmy knelt, opened it. Inside, a GoPro, cracked, covered in dried blood. It wasn't one of his. And then Jimmy noticed something worse. Scratched into the plastic casing, barely visible under the grime, was a name. Chandler. Jimmy's heart stopped. Chandler. His best friend. His right-hand guy in every insane challenge. He wasn't supposed to be here. Jimmy's voice cracked as he muttered, What the hell is this? The Norseman said nothing. He simply turned and walked through the massive wooden gate, disappearing into the Viking compound. Jimmy's fingers trembled as he pulled the blood-stained GoPro from the sack. Its screen flickered, barely functional. He pressed play. For a second, only static. Then Chandler's face filled the screen, sweat dripping, breathing hard. Day 2. I think this guy's serious. I thought this was like a Viking cosplay thing for content. But no. He made me fight him. Barehanded. He cut me, man. I had to hide in the woods last night. Sudden crashing in the footage. Chandler whipped around, the camera jolted. A scream, a flash of movement. Then silence. Jimmy's hands tightened around the device. He stood up, eyes burning with anger and something else out. They didn't tell me anyone else was part of this. Suddenly, a distant clang echoed through the compound. Jimmy looked up. Smoke had started rising from behind one of the longhouses. A deep drumbeat began, slow, deliberate, ancient. He hesitated, then crossed through the massive gate into Jarnheim. The village was hauntingly real, Everything smelled of pine resin and charred iron. He passed racks of Viking armor spears leaned against doorposts and animal hides strung between poles. And then he saw something strange. A modern camera rig abandoned behind a barrel, with Nolan's name scrawled on a strip of duct tape. No way, they sent more of us in. Jimmy stepped closer, but a sudden twang cut through the air. He ducked. An arrow shot past, thudding into the tree beside him. He turned. The Norseman stood on a raised platform, bow lowered. No words, just one outstretched finger pointing at a circular ring of shields in the center of the village. A fighting pit. The message was clear. Enter or run. And all around the edge of the ring, perched like ravens, were high-tech cameras already streaming. Jimmy swallowed hard. He stepped into the circle. And just before the Norseman followed him in, he said something that chilled Jimmy to the bone. This is the same place I broke Chandler's spirit. The moment Jimmy stepped into the ring of shields, something shifted. The wind stopped. The forest went silent. Even the birds which had chirped nervously before seemed to vanish. He glanced at the wooden floor beneath him, stained, scratched, weathered by something more brutal than time. On each shield around the ring, crude runes had been carved. Not painted, cut deep. Some still had flecks of red dried into the grooves. Jimmy whispered to himself, "What the hell did I just agree to?" The Norseman stepped in without a word. No camera crew, no referee, just the sound of the gate creaking closed behind them. Jimmy raised his hands, instinctively boxer stance. The Norseman smiled, then threw down his axe. Instead, he stepped forward with only his fists raised, scarred knuckles exposed. "You want honor, YouTuber," he growled. "Earn it." Jimmy barely had time to react. The first punch came too fast for a man that size. It slammed into Jimmy's ribs, knocking the wind from his chest. He stumbled back, coughing, but kept his feet. The second blow grazed his jaw. Blood trickled from his lip. He wiped it away, panting, and growled. "You hit like a copyright strike." Then he lunged forward. To everyone watching online, this wasn't the MrBeast they were used to. No games, no smiles, just raw survival. He tackled the Norseman into the dirt. They grappled, knees, elbows, fists, fury. The Norseman laughed as they rolled, roaring like he hadn't been alive in years. But then, Jimmy's hand caught something in the dirt. A shard of bone, maybe from a broken antler. He didn't even think. He swung it. It sliced across the Norseman's cheek, drawing blood. Real blood. Everything went still. The Norseman reached up, touched the cut, then smiled wide. "Now, we begin." Suddenly, loud cracks echoed from above. Drones, descending, recording, zooming in. From the treetops, loudspeakers activated. A deep voice, distorted and anonymous, boomed. "Stage 1 complete. The trial of the ring is past. The YouTuber may advance." Jimmy stared around, stunned. Advance to what? The Norseman stepped back, face dark again. "To where Chandler ran, to where your friend vanished, screaming." He pointed toward the back of the village, where a long, narrow tunnel of stone and moss led into the dark side of the mountain. Above its arched entry were fresh carvings. 2 names, Chandler and now Jimmy. Jimmy stood at the mouth of the tunnel. It wasn't just a cave, it was ancient. Viking-style stones stacked with eerie precision, moss-covered, carved with symbols he couldn't understand. Above him, the names still echoed in his mind. Chandler, Jimmy, as if this place were keeping score. The Norseman stood behind him, silent again, but this time there was something in his eyes, respect or pity. "No weapons," he said, "only light and memory." Then he shoved a burning torch into Jimmy's hand and vanished back into the village without another word. Jimmy turned toward the dark. He hesitated. The tunnel seemed to breathe warm air, exhaling like the stone itself was alive. He stepped forward. The torch flickered wildly as the light was swallowed by the stone throat of the cave. Inside, every footstep echoed like a warning. The walls were moist, etched with more runes, but also scratches, fresh ones. Like someone had tried to claw their way out. Jimmy kept walking. 10 steps, 20. Then, a whisper. Faint. "Jimmy." He froze. "What the?" It came again. "Jimmy, don't trust him." It was Chandler's voice. Jimmy spun around. No one. The torchlight shook in his hand. Sweat trickled down his neck. He stepped forward into a wider chamber, this one littered with bones. Not human. At least, not all of them. In the center was a stone platform. On it, a cracked tablet and an old metal object. Jimmy brushed the dust off. It was a Viking bracer, one used for combat. Inside, scrawled with a modern marker. "Nolan was here, don't go deeper." Suddenly, slam. The tunnel entrance closed. Jimmy ran back, nothing. No visible door, no trigger, just solid stone. Then from deep within the cave, something new stirred. Not a whisper, not a word. A scream. High-pitched, agonizing, human, and familiar. Chandler. Jimmy bolted down the path toward the sound torch flaring. He turned a corner and came face to face with a new chamber. Chains, a camera, and on the far wall, a video monitor still playing. On it, footage of Chandler crying, shaking, tied to a post. Then a shadow fell over him. A second man, not the Norseman. This figure wore a modern tactical vest, A headset. A military patch scratched out. Jimmy's jaw dropped. Who the hell is that? The video froze on the face for one frame, long enough for Jimmy to see. It was someone he recognized. From a collab, from a charity stunt, from a government-sponsored video. And that man wasn't supposed to be here. Then the screen shut off, and behind him, a deep voice spoke. You were never meant to see this, Mr. Beast. Jimmy spun around, torch raised like a weapon. The voice was close, too close. From the shadows stepped a tall figure in a black tactical coat. His face was calm, too calm. Jimmy stared, recognizing him instantly. No way. You're the guy from that military charity campaign. We did a promo together 2 years ago. The man nodded once. His voice was steady, businesslike. Operation Emberlight, disaster relief. You remember well. Jimmy took a step back. What the hell are you doing here? The man didn't blink. Cleaning up a mistake. He walked slowly around Jimmy, hands behind his back, as if this were a boardroom, not a moss-covered tomb. You weren't supposed to accept the challenge, Jimmy. This entire Project Yarnheim, the Norsemen, the streaming drones, it was built for someone else. A private buyer, a controlled story. Jimmy narrowed his eyes. A game. No, a demonstration. Jimmy's stomach dropped. The man continued. You ruined the script when you turned it into content. When you broadcast it. People weren't supposed to see what this kind of man, he motioned toward the deeper tunnels, could do when returned to his element. Jimmy's mind raced. The Norseman wasn't just an actor. He was part of something real, something engineered. Where's Chandler? The man paused. He made it to stage 4. Impressive. Jimmy felt his heart crack. Is he alive? The man offered a half smile. He was resourceful. Then something behind Jimmy moved. The torches in the room began to flicker blue, not from fire, from electric pulses. On the wall, a new screen lit up. Footage began to play. Not of Jimmy, not of Chandler, but of Nolan, running, screaming, being chased through the Viking woods by 2 masked figures in full military gear. This is what the private buyer paid for, the man said. Real emotion, real terror, real data. Jimmy turned on him, fury in his voice. You used us for some twisted entertainment experiment. The man's face darkened. Entertainment is just data. And Mr. Beast, you're the most valuable metric we've ever captured. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook. Alarms blared somewhere above. The man's earpiece lit up, a voice crackled. Zone breach. The Norseman, he's broken protocol. The man's expression dropped, for the first time fear. Jimmy stepped forward. Good, because I'm done playing. Then from behind the walls, a deep guttural roar sounded. Not human, not entirely. The screen behind the man shattered, and carved into the stone, glowing now with red heat, was a single Viking rune Jimmy hadn't seen before. It meant awakening. The walls trembled. Dust rained from above. Somewhere deep in the compound, something ancient had awakened. The man in the tactical coat stiffened. He wasn't supposed to break containment. He never has before. Jimmy backed toward the broken screen, heart pounding. Who is he? The man didn't answer. He tapped a device on his wrist. This is control. Containment failure in Yarnheim. Full lockdown authorization. But he stopped. The device sparked. Dead. The screen behind Jimmy flickered back to life on its own. No longer surveillance. Now, a countdown. Phase 2 initiating, Leo 59. Jimmy turned to the man. What's Phase 2? It's classified. Jimmy grabbed him by the vest. You dragged me into this nightmare, now talk. The man sighed like someone who knew things had slipped far beyond protocol. Phase 2 is a failsafe. If the Norseman breaks free of the narrative loop, the system triggers a purge. What kind of purge? Total. Every subject inside Yarnheim is to be erased. Jimmy's blood ran cold. You mean executed. The man didn't deny it. You were supposed to leave after Phase 1. Now you're an anomaly, which makes you expendable. Jimmy shoved him back and sprinted for the tunnel. Then I'm breaking the loop. Behind him, the man reached for his sidearm, but the ceiling exploded. Rocks crashed down, flames erupted from the far wall. And bursting through the smoke came the Norseman. But this time he was no longer calm, no longer testing. He was a storm. Half his face was painted with blood. His axe was gone. In its place, 2 modern combat blades strapped to his back. Jimmy stared, stunned. You knew the truth all along, didn't you? The Norseman growled through gritted teeth. I was built for war. They thought they could bury me in ritual. Cage me in a story. Feed me YouTubers like animals to a god. He pulled a keycard from his belt. But I found the cracks in their world. He tossed the card to Jimmy. Level 3, East Tower. That's where they keep the originals. The what? The real files, the raw tapes, the uncut footage of everyone who entered and didn't leave. The man in the tactical coat coughed blood on his lip. You won't make it to the tower. The Norseman didn't respond. He just picked up a piece of jagged stone and hurled it like a hammer. The man's screen shattered, his comms blinked out. Jimmy turned to the Norseman. If I get those files, we expose all of this. The Norseman smiled finally. Only if you survive the purge. Suddenly, boom, the countdown hit 000. Sirens howled, panels slid open in the stone walls, and from behind steel doors, they came out. Masked, armed, silent. Purge units. The air screamed with alarms. Jimmy and the Norseman didn't wait. They bolted through the collapsing tunnel as masked purge units stormed the chamber behind them, silent soldiers in black armor, eyes, hidden rifles gleaming under torchlight. One bullet clipped the stone near Jimmy's ear. Another hit the wall inches from the Norseman's head. They slid into a side passage, narrow, curved like a snake, and ducked behind a stack of ancient crates marked with runes and barcodes. You're telling me this place was never about Viking history, Jimmy panted. It's a lab. The Norseman didn't look at him. No, it's a mirror. Built to see how far men fall when you strip away everything modern and leave them with nothing but myth. Jimmy clenched the keycard. This tower, what's inside exactly? The originals, raw footage, early subjects, even your friend Chandler. Jimmy swallowed hard. And Nolan. The Norseman's eyes darkened. If we're lucky. They moved again this time, crawling through a collapsed section where old roots had broken through the ceiling. Dead torchlight flickered as they emerged into the open air. And there, rising above the treetops, the tower. It looked out of place. Cold steel among wooden halls. No Viking design. Just concrete antennas and one glowing surveillance eye at the top. Jimmy stared. That thing doesn't look ancient. It's not, the Norseman replied. It was dropped here 3 years ago by the same agency that funded this nightmare. Why? To study you. Meet your mind, your fear, your influence. They thought if they could break you, they could break anyone. Jimmy felt a rage he didn't know he had. Let's break them first. They ran, past abandoned huts, past ritual fires now extinguished. The purge units hadn't seen them yet, too busy clearing the lower sectors. The tower doors loomed ahead, sealed, armored, humming. Jimmy swiped the card. Access granted. They rushed in. Cold fluorescent light washed over them. Metal stairs spiraled upward. Cameras tracked their every move. Jimmy and the Norseman ascended in silence until halfway up, a voice boomed from the intercom. MrBeast, you are trespassing in a secured facility. This is your final warning. Jimmy didn't stop. You brought me here. I didn't sign anything. You did, the voice replied coldly. Your signature was digital, and your consent was implied the moment you hit record. Jimmy growled. Screw your contract. At the top level, the door opened. Inside, a circular control room, walls of screens, archived footage, names, dozens, hundreds. Chandler, Nolan, Carl, viewers, unknown test subjects. Even old footage from challenges Jimmy barely remembered. The Norseman stepped forward, running his hand along a screen showing a girl crying into a fire pit. She was Subject 12. They told her she was auditioning for a survival show. Jimmy approached a central console. A button glowed red. Purge override. He turned to the Norseman. If I hit this, what happens? The Norseman nodded. The doors open. The data gets dumped to the satellite uplinks. The world sees everything. And the purge units, they turn on each other. System resets. Jimmy hesitated. And you? The Norseman looked down at his scarred hands. I wasn't built to survive outside this place. Jimmy placed his palm over the button. You deserve to. Then, bang, a bullet ripped through the glass. The man from the tactical coat stepped inside, bleeding, furious weapon raised. I warned you, Jimmy. Jimmy froze, hand hovering above the red purge override button. The man in the tactical coat stood in the doorway, blood dripping from his shoulder pistol, aimed directly at Jimmy's head. Step away, he growled. The Norseman moved to block Jimmy instinctively, but the man turned his gun. Move and I shoot him first. Jimmy's eyes didn't flinch. You're not going to shoot me. Aren't I, the man said, voice calm. This whole experiment was about watching you break. Everyone said you couldn't, that you'd find a way out. But you're not special, Jimmy. You're a product. And this is how the story ends. The Norseman shifted his weight subtly. Jimmy didn't look at him, but he could feel it. He's about to charge. The man noticed it too. Don't even think about it. Jimmy spoke softly. You think people won't find out this tower's still broadcasting? You're not just murdering a YouTuber, you're killing a movement, a community. The man's lip curled. They'll forget by morning. The algorithm buries everything eventually. Suddenly flash. A blinding light from the wall of screens behind them. They all flinched. That's when Jimmy hit the floor. The Norseman lunged. Gunshot. It echoed like thunder in the tower. Jimmy felt something burn across his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He rolled toward the console and slammed his hand down on the red button. Override confirmed. Alert. All systems unlocked. Data dump to satellites in progress. Purge units reassigned. Live stream enabled. Across every screen in the control room, real-time feeds exploded into life. Purge units turning on each other. Hidden labs lighting up in red. Dozens of test subjects still alive, crying, yelling, breaking free. And above all, the global stream had gone live. Millions were watching. Back in the control room, the Norsemen had tackled the man from the coat. They wrestled violently, blade versus sidearm, ancient fury versus modern training. Blood splattered across the glowing interface. Jimmy crawled to the console, breathing hard. It's out. It's all out. They can't stop it now. Then, the Norseman rose, covered in blood, breathing like an animal. The man from the coat lay on the floor, motionless, his weapon shattered. Jimmy looked at the Norseman. It's over. But the Norseman didn't smile. He staggered back and collapsed to one knee. No, not for me. Jimmy ran over, tried to catch him. Blood pooled at his side. You were shot. The Norseman nodded slowly. They needed someone to play the monster, so I became it. But monsters don't leave the story. They end it. Jimmy's eyes welled up. I'm not letting you die here. The Norseman reached into his cloak, pulled out a small flash drive. Give this to the outside. It's everything they buried. Not just about me, about all of it. The black site, the early tests, the lost challengers, even you. Jimmy took it, fists clenched. You're coming with me. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tower. MrBeast, extract inbound, stay clear of roof, repeat, stay clear of roof. Jimmy looked up. Then, a helicopter's shadow slid across the glass dome overhead. But before he could react, the Norseman grabbed his collar. Jimmy, remember what they tried to do here? I won't forget. Good, the Norseman said. Then he stood barely and walked to the window. As the chopper lowered searchlights flaring, the Norseman turned back one last time. You walk away, I was never meant to. He leapt from the window, into the chaos below. Gone. Jimmy stood motionless at the shattered window. Below, the Norseman was gone. Whether he hit the trees, the ruins, or simply disappeared into the fire and smoke, Jimmy didn't know. The wind from the helicopter blades roared through the control tower. Voices screamed through a megaphone. MrBeast, we are extracting you now. Drop all equipment. Hands visible. Jimmy held the flash drive tight. No chance. He stuffed it down the side of his boot, tucked deep between laces, and stepped toward the rooftop door. As he emerged, the helicopter hovered masked figures with searchlights and rifles on either side. But these weren't purge units. These were something else. News cameras. A second chopper hovered just behind the first clearly live broadcasting. On the screen mounted above the pilot's seat, Jimmy could already see the comments scrolling. Is this real? What is happening? MrBeast was in a military facility. Free Jimmy. Where's Chandler? The pilot shouted over the wind. We're pulling you out before they shut us down. Uploads are being mirrored across 3 networks. Jimmy climbed aboard, breath-shaking blood soaking through his sleeve. As they lifted away from Yarnheim, the entire compound below looked like a scene out of a dystopian apocalypse. Viking huts on fire, soldiers dragging injured bodies, drones crashing to the ground, screens on every wall now reading, exposure complete. Jimmy sat in the cabin, finally catching his breath. A medic tried to examine him. He waved her off. He pulled out his phone. No service. But one notification had made it through before the blackout hit. YouTube trending #1, MrBeast Viking horror exposed. Full stream. Jimmy stared at the headline. The story had gone global. He leaned back, shaking. But he wasn't done yet. From his boot, he pulled the flash drive. No one else noticed. As the medic checked his vitals, Jimmy tucked it into his hoodie pocket. He whispered to himself, let's see how deep this really goes. The helicopter banked east toward the rising sun. And far below, unseen in the smoking remains of the compound, a single camera turned and followed the chopper. A green light blinked on its lens, and deep inside the ruins, a terminal lit up. Subject, Jimmy Donaldson, status escaped, reclassify Project Ragnarok. Phase 3, 2 days later, Jimmy sat in a secured debrief room at an undisclosed hospital in Northern California. White walls, no windows, a bowl of untouched hospital oatmeal on the tray beside him. He hadn't spoken to anyone except his lawyer. He hadn't posted. He hadn't slept. He just stared at the flash drive in his hand. They'd tried to take it, tried to tell him it was government property. But the world had seen the footage now. Millions of views, journalists, camping outside every YouTube office, conspiracy threads, exploding on every platform. They couldn't silence this. But one question still gnawed at him. Where was Chandler? A quiet knock. Jimmy looked up. The door opened, and in stepped a man with a heavy limp, bruises across his face, a stitched gash above his eyebrow. Chandler. Jimmy shot to his feet, breath caught in his throat. Dude. Chandler grinned weakly. Hey, man. They hugged tight. Longer than either of them expected. Chandler winced. Careful. Still got like 12 cracked ribs. Jimmy pulled back, eyes wide. What happened to you? Chandler sat down, exhaling slowly. After I disappeared, I was moved underground. Different facility. No Viking stuff. Just dark rooms, lights in my face. They kept asking me what I remembered. Kept playing back clips of us, like they were editing my memory. Jimmy frowned. What did they want from you? Chandler looked him dead in the eyes. They wanted to know if I still trusted you. Jimmy's stomach dropped. Why? Because if I didn't, they could break you faster. Jimmy fell silent. They tried to make you think I was dead. Chandler nodded. It almost worked. I thought maybe you'd leave if I vanished, or freak out, but you didn't. Jimmy clenched his jaw. I almost broke, but then I found this. He slid the flash drive across the table. Chandler picked it up, reading the scratched words on the casing. Project Ragnarok. Origins. You gonna open it? Chandler asked. Jimmy nodded. But not here. He stood up. There's only one place this story ends now, on my terms. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed from outside the room. An orderly opened the door, breathless. Mr. Donaldson, you have a visitor. He says it's urgent. Jimmy's brows furrowed. Who? The orderly hesitated. He wouldn't give his name, but he said this. He handed Jimmy a Viking coin. Worn ancient, with a symbol scratched into the back. A triangle, within a triangle, within a triangle. The Valknut. Jimmy and Chandler exchanged a look. Chandler whispered, Is he alive? Jimmy pocketed the coin. Only one way to find out. They stepped out into the hallway, and far down the corridor, standing like a statue under flickering lights, was a man with his back turned, cloaked, still, waiting. The hallway felt colder as Jimmy and Chandler stepped forward. Each fluorescent light flickered just slightly as if reacting to the presence of the figure ahead, still silent, cloaked. His back was turned. He hadn't moved an inch. And yet Jimmy felt the tension in the air thicken with each step. Chandler leaned close. Tell me that's not him. Please tell me he's not real again. Jimmy didn't answer. They reached 10 feet away, still motionless. Jimmy took a cautious step closer. You came back. The figure slowly turned, and there he was, the Norseman. But not as they remembered. His cloak was torn. One arm hung limp, bandaged tightly. His eyes, once filled with fire, were calm, tired, alive. You should have burned with the compound, Jimmy said, voice low. The Norseman replied without emotion. I walked through fire for a decade before I ever met you. Chandler stepped forward, fists clenched. You left us. You made me think I died down there. The Norseman looked at him evenly. You survived. That makes you stronger than 90% of this country. Silence. Then Jimmy held up the coin. Why now? The Norseman motioned toward the hospital exit doors. Because Jarnheim was never the final story. It was the test market. The next site is already operational. Jimmy's chest tightened. There's more. The Norseman nodded once. 3 more. He pulled from his cloak a burnt folder. Its edges blackened, the seal half melted. On the cover, U.S. Department of Defense. Black Site Initiative below it. Project Ragnarok. Stage 2, Atlantis. Jimmy blinked. Atlantis? It's what they're calling it. Underwater complex, no broadcast, total sensory deprivation. The subjects are already inside. How do you know? The Norseman's face hardened. Because I trained them before I escaped. Chandler was visibly shaken. You mean there are more people like you, like us? The Norseman lowered his eyes. No, worse, they volunteered. Jimmy stared at the folder. His grip on the flash drive tightened. Then we go public. We leak everything. We show the world what this really is, some twisted government-sponsored entertainment death trap. The Norseman stepped forward, closer than ever. If you go public with this folder, you die. Not online, not canceled. Dead. For real. In your sleep, in a cell, or in an accident. Jimmy didn't flinch. That's the cost of truth. The Norseman smiled sadly. Then you're braver than I was. Suddenly, a crackle of static. From somewhere inside the folder, a small radio transponder blinked red. The Norseman's eyes widened. They found me, Chandler swore under his breath. Jimmy turned. We need to move, now! But before they could, a voice came through the hospital intercom. Code black, lockdown in effect. All personnel to quarantine positions. Metal doors slammed down at the ends of the hallway. From the far staircase, 3 black-clad figures emerged. Fully armed, visors down, weapons up. The Norseman stepped in front of them. Get to the basement. There's an exit through radiology. I'll hold them. Jimmy grabbed his arm. You won't survive this time. The Norseman smirked. Then tell the story like I did. As the first shot rang out, Chandler grabbed Jimmy by the shoulder and pulled him toward the side door. And in that last moment, Jimmy turned back one last time. The Norseman was already charging. A ghost of Jarnheim. Unkillable, unbroken. And this time, fighting for the ones who remembered him. Jimmy and Chandler sprinted through the lower levels of the hospital. Alarms howled overhead. Steel gates slammed down behind them, sealing off every route they didn't take. They passed confused nurses, scrambling guards, and Terrified patients being locked in their rooms. How the hell did they find us this fast? Chandler gasped. He was tracked, Jimmy said, eyes sharp. That coin he gave me, probably a beacon. So what now? Jimmy didn't stop. Now we go to war. They reached radiology rows of white machines and flickering monitors. Jimmy hit a hidden latch beneath one of the x-ray tables, just like the Norseman described. Click. The wall slid open, revealing a dark staircase, spiraling down into the earth. Chandler paused at the top. What is this, a freaking Bond movie? Jimmy smirked. No, this is YouTube after the algorithm went feral. They descended. The staircase led into a cold concrete tunnel. At the end, a nondescript black SUV waited, engine humming. Inside, a flash drive reader, a sat phone, a satellite GPS, and 3 thick dossiers labeled Stage 2 Atlantis, Stage 3 Valhalla, Stage 4 Helheim. Chandler opened the Atlantis file. Photos spilled out. Underwater structures, cages, lab rooms with people floating in sensory tanks, wires running from their heads. And at the bottom, a list of names, each with a status. Most said in. Some said lost. Only one had a red stamp across it. Active target, Donaldson J. Jimmy exhaled slowly. They knew I'd survive Yarnheim. Atlantis was always the backup plan. Chandler frowned. Then why the games? Why not just take you out? Jimmy tapped the side of his head. Because I'm worth more as a story, as a symbol, as someone they can manipulate into proving their tech works. Chandler raised an eyebrow. And what exactly is Atlantis supposed to test? Jimmy handed him a photo. It showed a man strapped inside a tank, eyes closed. VR headset fused to his face. Dozens of wires drilled into his skull. Beneath it, a note. Stage 2 controlled identity collapse. Subject must not realize they are in a simulation. Chandler's jaw dropped. They're mind-trapping people. Jimmy nodded. And we just got the map. He reached for the sat phone. Dialed a number written in the folder margin, operator 19. A robotic voice answered. Access code. Jarnheim has fallen. Ragnarok has begun. A pause. Then, drop zone confirmed. You will be met at Point Kappa. Do not bring electronics. Do not speak of this call again. The line went dead. Jimmy turned to Chandler. We're going under. You mean, like, literally underwater? Exactly. If Jarnheim was myth-made physical, Atlantis is illusion turned lethal. Chandler looked at the ocean blue stamp across the file. And what happens if we get caught? Jimmy met his gaze. Then we never wake up again. They pulled onto the empty highway as dawn broke over the California coast. Somewhere offshore beneath miles of Ocean Stage 2 had already begun, and someone down there was waiting for Jimmy. 3 days later, Pacific Ocean, coordinates redacted. The boat rocked gently above what looked like just another part of the sea. But 200 feet below the surface, hidden beneath a decoy research buoy, a steel shaft descended straight into the blackness to Project Atlantis. Jimmy sat in a black wetsuit, heartbeat pounding beneath the pressure vest. Beside him, Chandler strapped on a helmet that doubled as a neural shock protector. So we're just diving straight into an underwater mine trap, huh? Chandler muttered. This feels like the dumbest thing we've ever done. Jimmy checked the timer on his wristband. Correction, this might be the most important dumb thing we've ever done. A robotic voice came from the boat's onboard AI. Dive chamber unlocked. Descent to level 0 initiating. Welcome to Atlantis. The hatch slid open. A platform dropped. Water flooded around them, cold blue infinite. Then silence. As they descended in the pressurized pod, lights blinked outside the windows. Motion sensors, proximity beacons. Somewhere far below, a dim green glow began to emerge. Chandler pressed his face to the window. Is that the city? Jimmy leaned closer. Below them sprawled an enormous circular structure miles wide. It looked like a fallen UFO covered in coral and cables. Glowing towers rose from its center. Shadows moved across the glassy walls. And at the heart of it all, a massive dome with one symbol etched into the steel. The Valknut, again. They're branding this crap like it's a franchise, Chandler muttered. Jimmy didn't answer, because something else had appeared outside. A face, staring at them from the water. A diver. No, its eyes glowed. It vanished before they could process it. The pod connected with the docking station and hissed open. A long corridor waited, lit with sterile white light. Too clean, too quiet. Jimmy stepped forward. Inside, they found rooms filled with tanks, floating subjects suspended in clear liquid eyes, closed, twitching like dreamers, stuck between sleep and death. Each one labeled, each one numbered. Chandler read aloud. Subject A01, Subject B192. They reached a side door. The nameplate read, Zoantine Donaldson J. Jimmy froze. What the hell? He opened it. Inside was a tank, empty. But above it a screen. It blinked awake as he entered. File error subject Donaldson J already in session. Wait, what does that mean? Chandler asked. Jimmy stared at the screen. A realization sank into his stomach like a stone. They think, I'm already inside. Suddenly, a siren blared. Unregistered presence detected. Code echo, protocol loop correction. Metal shutters slammed down. Lights turned red. A distorted voice echoed from the intercom. You should not be awake yet, Jimmy. He turned. A figure stepped from the shadows, wearing his own face, but not him. Clean-shaven, smiling, wearing the classic MrBeast merch hoodie. Welcome back to your channel, the doppelganger said with a grin. Time to finish your episode. Jimmy stared at the figure in front of him. Same face, same eyes, same voice, but it wasn't him. It was smoother, more cheerful, unnaturally perfect. Like a version of himself filtered through every branding meeting thumbnail test and algorithm tweak. What are you, Jimmy whispered. The doppelganger beamed. I'm the version of you they built to replace you. Cleaner, safer, always on message. No panic, no rebellion. Just perfect engagement. He grinned wider. I'm the MrBeast who never asks too many questions. Chandler backed up slowly. This is a deepfake with a god complex. Jimmy stepped forward. You're not real. Aren't I the thing, said spreading its arms. Behind it, the screens on the wall lit up. Video thumbnails filled them. Millions of them. Jimmy giving away an island. Jimmy surviving 50 hours in a desert. Jimmy trapped in a glass box. Jimmy smiling. Jimmy screaming. Jimmy dying. Jimmy froze. Wait, that one? He stepped closer to a thumbnail where his face was pale, collapsed on a hospital floor. Chandler leaned in. Dude, that's you, but we never filmed that. The doppelganger spoke again. These are prototypes. Drafts of possible timelines. The simulation they placed your mind in while your body was held in the tank. That's how they test new personas. New content arcs. Jimmy turned fire in his eyes. I broke the loop, I made it out. You think you did. Suddenly the screens all blinked and turned black. In their place, one countdown. Final upload 0059. The fake Jimmy walked to the center of the room and raised both arms. The world will see what they want to see. Not who you are, but who they've trained to expect. Jimmy glanced at Chandler. We have to crash the system. How? Chandler pulled the flash drive from his belt, the one they'd taken from Yarnheim. Still intact. Still full of the raw files. Maybe this will remind the system what real looks like. They jammed it into the master console. Instantly, sparks flew. The lights dimmed. Subject tanks began to drain. The simulation began to crack. The fake MrBeast began to glitch. No, this isn't your story anymore. But Jimmy stood tall. No, it never was. It was ours. He grabbed the master override switch and yanked it down. The entire dome shook. Ceilings cracked. Water burst through seams. The doppelganger screamed, then shattered into static. All around them, the trapped subjects opened their eyes. Alive. Confused, but free. A voice rang through the chamber, robotic and final. Project Ragnarok terminated. All simulations offline, uploading original memories. Jimmy and Chandler rushed back to the evac tunnel as the ocean began to swallow Atlantis. They climbed into the pod, sealed it, and launched upward through the dark. Sunlight hit them like a resurrection. As they broke the surface, gasping, coughing, laughing, a nearby boat's crew ran to them. One man looked at Jimmy stunned. Is it really you? Jimmy nodded slowly. It's really me. The world's going insane. Your live streams, your face. You were just on TV 5 minutes ago doing a challenge in Tokyo. Jimmy grinned, exhausted. Then tell them this, that guy wasn't me. He looked at Chandler. Let's go home. As they sailed back to shore, the clouds parted. And for the first time in weeks, Jimmy felt real. No lights, no scripts. Just sky, salt, truth, and far behind them sinking beneath the waves. The final echo of a war no one was supposed to remember.